hairdressers over in Curtain Road in Shoreditch, and it's this kind of search result page. This is beyond the standard sort of, title and meta description search result that you'd see, and you can see that Google's pulling through some kind of data with the little stars, the ratings, reviews, and the price ranges. And we're going to talk about how you do stuff like Review Center search results as well. We're joined by Jonathan Stewart. He's managed to get 2 results in the same page without one being indented. I thought that was really cool. No, right, okay, we'll work it out. So are microformats worth investigating? I mean, are they relevant to you? Can you be bothered to do them? Well, actually, if you've got people on your website and your website does products, or maybe it has some kind of event information or location information, people are leaving reviews. If you've got any of that kind of thing going on, any source of data on your website, then yes, it probably is. And there's a ton of stuff that you can do with it. So what I'm going to do first is try and explain to you what microformats are. So if you imagine, the web is quite a data-rich place, right? There's tons of content. We surf around all day, every day, and we read text and pages, and we, as human beings, might come across something like an address in that text. And the thing is about us is that, when you see an address like 123 Curtain Road or something like that, we instantly know that that text is an address. Or we instantly know, when you see start time and end time, like, for a party at your friend's house, when you see information like that, you instantly understand that that's an event, because we're people and we recognize those things. The problem is with machines or search engines is that they don't naturally recognize those things, right? They don't see an address and just instantly go, that's an address. Somebody has to code that in. They have to write code to help search engines understand this. And it's a lot of work. So what microformats do, is they add structure to this data. They allow machines to have an easier time of understanding what that data is. So I'm going to show you some examples of that, but fundamentally the microformats that we can use now to enhance our search result pages in Google are designed to enhance addresses, ratings and reviews, products and events, and I'm going to talk to you about some of those now. So the first one, I used an address as my first example. I'm going to tell you about HCard. HCard is a microformat standard that lets you mark up an address or some location details or some contact details on a web page. And actually, it's really easy. It's not particularly difficult at all to implement microformats into a web page. So you can see in our example over here in the middle, I hope you can all see this. We've got a little bit of HTML. So we've got a div, and we've got some spans and some quite familiar looking bits of code. And to implement microformats, to tell the search engine that bits of this address are, it's an address, it's a postcode, it's a street name, we've just implemented these little class equals attributes inside the HTML. So you can see that instead of just opening a div in HTML, we say this is vcard, class equals vcard, to mark up the name of the organization, like the location that we're talking about in microformats. We established that as class fn.org, which is FN is just name, and org stands for an organization. We've recognized, or we've helped a search engine understand that the name of this place is actually a business. So there's a ton of different sort of variables. Well, in fact, there's not even a ton. I mean, for HCard, there's probably about 10 different variables that you kind of need to be able to mark up most standard address data. But it's really easy. You can see that that's just a plain, ordinary piece of HTML, and we've just put some class equals attributes in there to mark up that data as an address, as a location. And HCard's used for a couple of different things. So obviously, understanding address data for search engines in reviews and events, which we're going to come on to in a moment, but also for local citations and Google Places. And I think generally speaking, the advice that Google gives us is when we're marking up addresses for a local business, it makes them more easily able to take that data and add it to place listings pages and things like that. So it's quite important. So next is reviews. And the microformat that we use to mark up reviews, and I think this is probably the most relevant for most of the people in this room, is hreview. And when somebody leaves a review of a product or something on your webpage, they'll leave their name, They'll give you something like a rating out of 5, usually, and a summary of how they felt about that product. So if we look at the code, again, I mean, I say code, but this, it's just ordinary HTML. All we've done is we've renamed some classes that might describe some of the styling in your web page, which is probably there already. So you can see that we've opened a div with hreview. So we've said, yeah, whatever's contained in this div is going to be a review. Our item is the thing that we're reviewing, and so on and so forth. Summary, description, and of course the rating down there at the bottom. And that's all data that search engines can pick up on and start to use. Instead of them having to use bandwidth to work out what that data is telling them in the first place, we're telling them what the data is, and they can start thinking more along the lines of, well, what can we do with this data now that we've got it? And the answer is that they can start enhancing their search results pages or start building new products to help users find the right results in the first place. So it's quite exciting. So hreview is used for rich snippets and organic search results. We saw some examples of that at the beginning of the presentation. Also review data that gets pulled through to place pages. I believe that it makes it easier for them to syndicate that content upwards and into Google Places. And also reviews in product search results, which Johnny does a lot of. He's going to talk to you about that in a moment. So for websites that have events, so courses, maybe gigs or theatre or something like that, we can use a microformat called hcalendar to tell search engines what that data means. And again, if you think about an event, you've got an event name, you've got a start time, an end time, you've got the location where that event will be, and so on and so forth. And it's quite interesting because you start to see in the hcalendar microformat components that might feel a little bit familiar, and that's because microformats, where possible, try to reuse the same attributes across different disciplines. So we've got down here at the bottom, when we're talking about the location of our World of Welsh Lamb event, is Leadenhall Market. And look, it's the same fn.org class in there. And again, we're establishing an address, which is actually a component of hcard. So microformats are interchangeable, and they're really simple to implement because for the most part, you've already got a web page, you've already got some HTML, and you've already got CSS style classes marking up that data in the first place. So this is very much about you understanding what variables you need to use and then playing around with actually implementing them into the web page. So the outcome is this. I'm going to show you some real examples now. So this is a hreview example from techradar.com, and you can see that actually in the actual web page code there are some attributes there that have been combined, and it still works. So class equals hreview, class equals item, class equals reviewer, and so on and so forth. And there's a little bit of variation on the terminology that they've used, and Google can still parse this stuff. They're quite smart like that. This is one of ours. So this is I think this is quite relevant to a lot of affiliates that are doing sort of ticket sales and event-based stuff. In that, what we've got here with the search phrase is photography events London. But what we've actually got here is a category page with a listing of events on that category page, and each event is individually marked up with hcalendar. So they've used all those attributes that we've talked about for hcalendar, and the end result is this form of rich snippet is the right way to describe it. And this one came up yesterday morning. Somebody asked in the presentation, how does this search result work? Well, the best way to make this happen is implement hcalendar and mark up each individual event on your category page with the start time, the end time, the location, and so on and so forth. And that's the end result, a link to the actual event, the start date, and the location that the events will be hosted at. And finally, hcard. Hcard's quite an interesting one when you're describing sort of business locations and stuff like that. Actually, you can combine hcard with other attributes from other microformats, and we might take on a few questions about that a little later on in the presentation. But there's a microformat actually called hresume, and if you combine hresume with hcard and pull through some attributes from what's called the XFN Friends Network, like LinkedIn do, that's the kind of rich snippet that you could potentially end up with. And all it really takes each time that you're looking at one of these is first of all go to Google Webmaster Help, and have a look at what they say is important to them when you're marking up this stuff, and then go and have a look at some similar search results pages and dissect somebody else's web page and have a look at how they're doing it. So something that I hope we're going to be talking about a little more, a quick tip from yesterday's site architecture session. I'm really, really big into UGC and using UGC to make web pages more unique. But if you combine sort of UGC with reviews, you could actually put reviews on category pages, not just necessarily product pages or like voucher code pages that are being reviewed. And Johnny's going to talk to you about how to aggregate review data and to turn fundamentally lots of different reviews into one. And we call that an aggregate review. So yeah, I'll move on. So if you're implementing microformats, it takes time. It's worth doing, but it doesn't happen overnight. You're not going to see your search results changing, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about how to test and how to make sure that your microformats are actually validating properly in the web page. But fundamentally, there's a URL here to the rich snippets testing tool, and you'd mark up your microformats on the web page and just keep testing until they validate. They should look a little bit like this test page here for green bears. There's the URL if you want to go and have a look at the markup. And as soon as you're ready, you can submit your web page to Google to scrutinize. A couple of recommendations. So I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't promote my website. So there's a link to the category where I write about microformats, and there's guides on how to implement this stuff on your web pages. And also get this book. This book really frames, or it really provides a great understanding of what microformats mean and why they exist and how they've evolved, and some of the other technologies and other microformats that you could investigate for different kinds of websites too. So that's microformats in a nutshell. Thank you very much. You can download this presentation at seogadget.co.uk/a4uexpo, and I will hand you over to the capable hands of Mr. Jonathan Stewart. Thank you.
Okay. My name's Jonathan. I'm the head of search and social media at Review Centre. You can find me on Twitter at Jonath if you want to send me any questions related to this presentation. Just a quick introduction about Review Centre. We are 11 years old. We're one of the largest consumer review sites in the UK. We have 500,000 reviews covering 100,000 products. You can find us at our main domain, reviewcentre.com. We're also on Facebook and Twitter. Now, I think Rich has done quite a good job of covering the technical aspects of trying to get rich snippets showing for your site. So I want to focus more on our experience of the process, our experience of the timescales, and some of the traffic observations we made once we had our rich snippets showing. So effectively, this is what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to get Google to show rich snippets for our structured data, which we've marked up. There's plenty of good documentation from Google that will tell you how to do that. Just before I go any further, who in this room has actually tried to get rich snippets working for their site? 2 people? 4 people? Who's actually been successful? So not everyone. Okay, that's quite interesting. Well, Review Centre is, as you might expect, a review site. So we marked up all our review content. There are 2 different types of review markup you can use. The first is individual reviews. So there's an example of an individual review from Review Centre. And the second is an aggregate review. And I'll come back to both of these in a minute. Before I go any further, I just want to give a brief introduction to our website hierarchy. This big purple triangle is meant to represent the volume of pages we have at every level in the site. And not only that, it kind of also represents the amount of traffic we get at each level. So at the home page, we've got a single page and not that much traffic. Tier 1, we have slightly more pages, a bit more traffic. Once you get into the deepest, darkest depths of Review Centre, you have these 2 levels at the bottom, what we call item pages and review pages. And these pages are where all our review content sits. And these pages account for about 75% of our traffic. So effectively what I'm trying to say here is that we were rolling out rich snippets to a huge number of pages, which should affect quite a large volume of our traffic. But I didn't want to do it all in one go. I wanted to do it a stage at a time and then measure the effectiveness, find out whether it was worth doing more. So first of all, we rolled out to our item pages. So this is an example of an item page. On Review Center, it's a single product page. Sorry, it's a single page about an individual product. It pulls in aggregate review content. So this page here is about the Apple iPad. And this is a page that we would mark up as an aggregate review. So here are the properties that we have to mark up with microformats. So we have to mark up the item reviews, which in this case is the iPad, the rating, which here is 4.5, and the total number of reviews, which in this instance is 17. And then when Google starts showing you a rich snippet, it will look a little bit like that. Just in terms of getting your rich snippets working, this is the same tool that Richard was talking about. So effectively, you can plug in your URLs into this tool, and Google will show you what your markup is meant to look like. I wouldn't suggest you do this on the live site. Create a dummy site that you can just whack up any old HTML to, hack it around until you get it working, and then roll it out to your live site once you're happy with it. So this bottom link will take you to the rich snippet tool. Once you're happy with it, you then have to fill out a form and let Google know that you want to be part of the rich snippet program. So at this point, you have to submit some URLs that you've actually marked up, and Google will then go and assess you. So the process went a little something like this. My predecessor actually submitted Review Center to Rich Snippet Program back in October last year. About a month later in November, we actually got an email from Google telling us that there's a problem with our markup. I then fixed it in early December, resubmitted, I think probably mid-December, and then what happened next was quite interesting. We heard absolutely nothing, and this was really quite frustrating because having gone through the process of doing all this work and speaking to Google, we then had no idea what was going on. And it's even more frustrating, they have words like this within their documentation. So they say, if I mark up my pages, does that guarantee I'll get rich snippets? So having gone through this process, you still might not get included anyway. So we sat there for quite a long time wondering what was going on. We finally got included on the 30th of January, so that was 6 weeks after submission. So throughout that process, we tried to get in touch with Google via Google Webmaster Tools, various other techniques we have of getting hold of Google. Basically, we got stonewalled. We didn't hear anything from them. What happened next was very interesting. So across the set of item pages that we rolled out rich snippets to, immediately afterwards, we saw a traffic increase of about 14% to those pages. So we thought, wow, that's great. Let's do a bit more of that. So we then decided to roll out rich snippets to the next tier within our site, which is all our individual review pages. So this is an example of an individual review page on Review Center. And these are the elements that we had to mark up. Sorry, it gets a bit complicated with all the arrows here. So we have to pass the reviewer information, which here is Kirsty88. The item reviews, which is the Apple iPad. The date reviews, the rating, and then the description, which I think is just a small snippet of the actual review. And once you get accepted into Google, this is how your rich snippet will look. Now, in terms of rolling out rich snippets to more pages, I thought this process was quite interesting because I didn't know when you first submit to Google to be included within the rich snippet program, you have to let them know which URLs you're going to mark up. But basically, once you're accepted the first time, that effectively is a license to mark up as much content as you've got on your site. So once you've been included, you can then just go and roll out markup to other pages. Google will just come and crawl that content, cache it, and as soon as it gets cached, it will show up within the search results. So we did lots of traffic forecasting. We had a guess in terms of how much traffic uplift we thought we should see. Bearing in mind last time we saw a traffic uplift of about 14%. This time we only saw a traffic uplift of about 4%. So we were a bit confused. We started doing a bit of digging around, and this is where our traffic observations come in. Now, I don't think you need a degree in astrophysics to realize that if you mark up your pages, you'll see a traffic increase. Basically, your results will look more appealing, you'll get an increased CTR, therefore more traffic to these pages, bless you. But we also noticed that we saw traffic to non-marked up pages. And this really stumped us for quite a long time, until we finally worked out that the non-marked up pages were always secondary results on an indented listing. So effectively, if you got rich snippets showing on that primary listing, it would kind of boost traffic to that whole result unit. So why the discrepancy between the 14% that we saw and the 4% that we saw? So imagine this result unit for the query, we buy any car review. We have an item page listing at the top and a review page sitting as an indented listing. Now, if I get a rich snippet showing on the top result, then that whole unit sees an uplift in traffic. If I then roll out rich snippets to the bottom result, we didn't then see the same kind of uplift. It's kind of as if we only saw the bigger uplift for the first bit of rich snippets we rolled out. And this is kind of quite interesting when you come to rolling this out on large enterprise level sites. Because we certainly had lots of this kind of stuff going on that we were completely unaware of. So by rolling out rich snippets, we kind of really changed the way people were clicking through the pages on our site. We also noticed some degree of cannibalization. So these are kind of very simplified figures. But as you might expect, before rich snippets, we had something like an 80-20 split for traffic for this search term. If you roll out snippets to a top result, you might then get a 90-20 split. Or conversely, if you roll out snippets only to the bottom result, then that could be 70 or 30, which is something to think about if you generate more revenue through other pages. So in terms of key takeaways, I would say don't expect a great deal of feedback from Google. You should see a significant traffic uplift. We certainly did. And be prepared for change in traffic patterns, so especially things like cannibalization and where you've got indented results where you're rolling out rich snippets to. Thank you very much.
Morning, everyone. The problem with speaking on the second day of these kind of conferences is that you wore your lucky pants on the first day, and what are you supposed to do on the second day? My name's Will Critchlow. It should be Tom Critchlow speaking here. The program said it was going to be Tom. He's my brother. Nobody can tell us apart anyway, so this is just probably adding to the confusion. But I'm Will. I'm taller, better looking. Anyway. Data feed SEO. This is going to be a little bit different. I think everything that can be said about micro formats has been said, pretty much, although I have a couple of questions for these guys later. So we will dig further into that in the Q&A. But I'm going to talk more about the problems with data feeds. So often, a lot of what these guys have been talking about is about marking up your own data. Review Center have their own reviews. The events that Rich was talking about, or a lot of that content, that's your own data. In the affiliate world, a lot of people are marking up third-party data. So you're pulling a data feed in, doing something with it, putting it on your website, hoping it's going to rank. And there's a whole bunch of problems with that. The first one being this: data feeds are not unique, kind of by their definition. They're provided to everyone, or at least lots of people. And that causes some problems. We've been seeing two big kinds of issues that I think affect a lot of the guys in this room, potentially. One is the increasing, what's the right word? Well, Google is getting less and less friendly towards affiliates. I think it's probably fair to say. I had a typically short and unhelpful response from a senior member of the web spam team about a project that we were working on when I showed them something and said, we've seen some odd behavior here, think it's probably worth you having a look at it. I got a typically short and helpful, looks like there's a lot of affiliate stuff going on there. All right, what's that supposed to mean? I mean, affiliate stuff ranks all over the place. It's not like you can't rank if you're an affiliate. What do you mean? But I think there is a problem there. And that's why I think especially affiliates need to go above and beyond in adding value to users. It's not enough, unless you're kind of churning and burning, it's not enough to just present information like you used to be able to and just rank. You have to be offering a kind of superlative user experience, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. But there's also a secondary problem, which is that affiliates, again, by the nature of what you do, you're promoting other people's stuff very often, pretty much always. And that means that there's a lack of uniqueness, right? You're reusing content. So that's what we're going to talk about. This is a problem in Google for two reasons. Firstly, you've got the algorithmic stuff. That's the robot. They automatically detect things. And you can get anything from filtered, penalized, just not rank as well as you think you should, all kinds of problems. There's also the manual reviews. And you need very different approaches to target these two different things, because the kinds of tricks that fool robots are different to the kind of tricks that fool humans. Kinds of things that persuade them that your site is in fact high quality and deserves to rank are different when you're talking to humans and when you're talking to robots. So I'm going to talk about the robots first. This is the kind of traditional view of unique content, which is that effectively you've got two kind of axes. You've got how big and powerful is your site, right? There are all kinds of sites that you'll see around the web, probably some of them are run by people in this room, that are big, powerful, and old, and you can stick anything, you used to be able to certainly, stick anything you liked on it and it would rank. Doesn't matter if it's a duplicate of somebody else's. And there's a degree of uniqueness. So in the bottom left-hand corner, we've got non-unique content on a small, piddling little domain. Now, that never used to rank, and it's certainly still not going to rank. Top right-hand corner, strong site, unique content. Well, happy days, but unfortunately, affiliates especially struggle to be in that category, right? Unique content and low trust, that's also typically not an affiliate game. That's your newbie blogger or somebody like that who's ranking for long tail things, but never really challenging anywhere else. And I think a lot of affiliates would traditionally see themselves in the bottom right, particularly if you're building up a kind of a big site, a brand site as an affiliate. You've got a strong site, but not necessarily unique content. But it's not that binary anymore. It's much more of a kind of mix of different factors. Elements on a page can be unique. Elements on a page can be not unique. Elements are reused across your site, and that maybe would have been used to have been seen as unique, and now isn't. Mayday had a big impact on this. I was starting to come to the opinion that actually elements within a page were being treated as almost as their own pages in order to determine uniqueness. I did run that theory past a Googler, and he kind of said, well, you're kind of on the right lines, but it doesn't actually work like that. So it's kind of a useful mental model, but it isn't actually what they're doing. But if you think about breaking a page down into, the stuff I've pulled in from the merchant's feed, my own unique UGC, maybe I pulled in some Twitter data, a YouTube video, whatever else. Each one of those things has their own varying amount of uniqueness, right? Some of it will never have been indexed in that particular order, in that particular sense, shape, but all of the words came from somewhere else. That's typically the case with a Twitter feed, for example. If you filter a Twitter feed, all of that individual, every sentence appeared somewhere else, but maybe that bit of the whole block of content isn't unique. The YouTube and the merchant's description are probably exactly duplicate of things that are elsewhere, and your reviews may be completely unique to your site, or maybe they're repeated more than once internally on your site. And all of those different things, it's like a mixing desk. That kind of each one has its own degree of uniqueness, and you can kind of play with them independently, and they have quite complex interactions. I'm not going to tell you who this is, but this is real analytics data from a relatively thin but large affiliate site, and you'll see big drop, which looks a lot like a link penalty, right? Anybody who's dealt with Google penalties in the past, you see this kind of thing when you're only now ranking for your domain name, or something equally joyous. Although that could have happened in this case, they said it certainly wasn't whiter than white. We worked out that wasn't in fact happening. They came along to us and they said, look, have we been penalized for this stuff that we're doing, this stuff that we're doing, or that stuff that we're doing? Frankly, it could have been any one of them, and some others. But what the conclusion that we came to, or at least the hypothesis that we drew, was that this was a uniqueness problem. That this was the dials having been turned a little bit at Google's end, some changes to the site about the degree to which all of those little mixers on the mixing desk were affecting the uniqueness or otherwise of their content. And by adding some content that was technically unique, this snippet at the top is what was added to the pages. Welcome, visitor. Please find our selection of insert product name below. We have a number of product items. We think you'll like them. Okay, and because obviously the product name and the number of items was actually unique, technically this was a unique snippet of text. Now, it's not very unique, and I realize that's terrible English, and any English graduates would probably want to shoot me for even thinking about using the word very unique. But you wouldn't expect this to really work. But it did a little bit, right? So you see where the traffic comes back up on the bottom right. It doesn't come back up to where it was, comes back up to about a third. But that's on the day that this change got indexed. Okay, so this was a test. Add somewhat unique, but obviously completely automatically generated content, and a little bit of that penalty gets lifted, or at least some things start ranking again. It cleared some of that uniqueness hurdle. And obviously this is across an awful lot of pages, so actually going and writing proper unique content is going to be a massive job, and so we wanted to run this test first and see what happened. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Rich already mentioned the benefits of user-generated content. This is a good way of not having to write your own stuff, right? Get the people who come to your site to write it for you. The problem is that you need a community, which is a pain, because they're kind of expensive to build, and they're full of annoying people, and they generate support requests and all that kind of stuff that none of us really want to deal with. And I want to talk through 3 possible approaches to generating this kind of thing. So we've got the concept of user-generated content. It's a lovely way of adding uniqueness to data that would not otherwise be unique, but it's tough. So what can we do? Firstly, we can go for user-generated content, i.e. user-generated content doesn't have to be generated by people who would naturally be users of your site. Anything from Mechanical Turk to Odesk to Elance to Craigslist. There are many, many ways of generating user-generated content. You need to be careful here about, this is not a good way of generating reviews, for example, because paying people to write reviews of things gets you into sticky legal areas. But it's absolutely no problem if you're talking about descriptive content or people writing comments and those kinds of things, especially this is on your own site we're talking about here. So that's absolutely fine. Incidentally, if you're thinking about using Mechanical Turk, that's kind of tough from the UK. I believe you still can't sign up from the UK. But there's a service called Smartsheet, which is smartsheet.com, which is I actually find it easier to use anyway. It's a spreadsheet functionality. It's a bit like Google Spreadsheets. It's all web-based. But it's got a nice integration with Mechanical Turk. So you can create rows and say, and each row describes a task. So the first cell might say, which page do you want somebody to write something on? Second column might say, what do you want them to write about? And you just select that, hit one button to what they call smart source it, which sends each row off as an individual Mechanical Turk task. And you can say how much you're prepared to pay for each row to be done. It's a brilliant interface. It does add a markup to it, so it isn't the cheapest way of interfacing, but it is a very, very simple way of getting started. You probably want to build your own thing if you're going to be doing it on a massive scale, because otherwise you'll end up paying most of your money to Smartsheet. But it is very cool. Alternatively, there is real content generated by real users that just wasn't generated on your site, which is always really unfortunate, isn't it? You know, the damn users, they go and leave reviews on other people's sites, or they write content elsewhere. Sometimes you can repurpose that. And, you know, again, the details of the ins and outs, the intricacies of this are going to depend on what information you're pulling, how you're reusing it, and you need to be careful not to infringe anything. But this is especially useful if content is being created in walled gardens. And sometimes it's being created in your own walled gardens. So, you know, if content's on your Facebook page and not, you know, particularly easily spiderable, or it's Twitter replies to you, or it's support requests, and I love this one, automatically getting stuff from email routed through to the website. Again, you know, you need your terms and conditions to be in order and all the rest of things, but there's often huge amounts of content getting generated that are not being put anywhere indexable. And you can put those in indexable places and end up with unique content on your website. If you're going to be doing that kind of thing, I built this cheat sheet. There's the whole deck will be available online. You won't be able to see any of that from the audience, I don't suppose. But basically what it does is it shows you a bunch of different sources of data that I found, including a load of public APIs, a load of APIs you can pay for, sources of data, and how you can go about querying that data. And this is coming from, so I'm not a programmer. I understand, I can read some easy languages. I can write really, really bad code. But I set myself a little challenge of, in 2 hours, learning enough Python, Yahoo query language, XPath, and Google App Engine to build myself a little basic kind of crawler, scraper, mashing data together, and did manage it. And I wrote my experience up in a blog post on SEO mods. And, you know, if I can learn to do the basics in 2 hours, then anybody who has actual developers who already know programming languages will probably be able to do something much more impressive. So, you know, get to work on that kind of stuff. And the final, so the three things. We've got user-generated content, user-generated content, and user-generated content. The third of these is when users did generate it, they generated it on your site, but they didn't necessarily think that they were generating content as they did it. And this includes internal search queries. It includes navigation paths. It includes when they tag pages, when they give a testimonial, all kinds of things like that. You need to be careful with this one. The search queries in particular, if you start slapping search queries on pages, you can very quickly find yourself in a world of pain. It's quite low quality content, and it's self-reinforcing in a not particularly positive way, because somebody finds you on page 7 for some really obscure term that you shouldn't really rank for anyway, and you only did because, you know, one word's over here, one word's over there, and one word's down there. And you suddenly slap that search query on your page, and all of a sudden you now rank first page for that useless query. And so your traffic quality takes a big nosedive, and it's seen as definitely a pretty aggressive form of things. And I'm not necessarily advocating it for everyone. You need to use it with extreme care. And I know more people who've taken it off than have put it on. But nonetheless, it's worth pointing out that there are all kinds of sources of data that come from places that aren't people coming to your site and commenting or leaving a review. If you're going to be starting to do this kind of work to make your pages more unique, and every time I say that, I hate myself a little bit. It's like when you tweet and you put an apostrophe in the wrong place. Damn it. I'm going to stick with it. You're making your pages more unique. You want to tell if that's working. So you want to be able to segment your analytics data by the degree of uniqueness of the page. So some quite cool ways of doing that are, if it is with reviews or comments, set a custom variable of how many reviews or comments are on that page. And there's a bit of code here that shows you how to do that. You want to set it as a page level variable. So there are 3 levels of variable in analytics. Tom talked about this yesterday in his epic analytics presentation. You can set session level, user level, or page level variables. And a user level variable is something that applies to me even if I go away, come back, come to a different session. So that's things like is a previous customer, has ever given me money, would be an example of a user-level custom variable, because that's true about me. That never changes. Once I've given you money, I am a previous customer. A session-level variable might be is logged in, because on any given visit, I could be logged in or logged out, but it's true across a visit, give or take. Page-level variable is this kind of thing. How many reviews are on a page? How many comments are on a page? And if you're using WordPress, I recommend checking out Yoast's SEO plugin. He's just released a new one, which does all kinds of kick-ass stuff, including setting custom variables for the author, and I believe it does something similar for the comments. And basically what this lets you do is you can then segment how you're doing based on the uniqueness of your page. And if you have some other variable, so supposing, back to the example that I showed earlier where we put that really crappy unique content across loads of pages as an experiment, as a test, if you do that, and then maybe you pick your top 50 to write proper quality content on, set a variable to know which ones were which, and then you can compare them as an aggregate and say, yes, we got a 30% bump in the ones that put the crappy, barely unique content on, but we got a 70% bump in the ones that got the handwritten content, and then you can build a business case. You can say, right, we need to spend this much money going not from the top 50, but going maybe down to the top 1,000 pages to write real quality, unique content. Especially useful here, definitely set this for the ones that have 0. So if you have pages with no reviews, no comments, no uniqueness, where you've just pulled in manufacturer data or mashed up data that's available elsewhere, set a custom variable. And I suspect you will find a massive performance difference in how those different kinds of page appear. Context. So everything I've said here is kind of true on average, but there are different areas where factors are taken into account in different ways. So there's a big skew towards diversity in Google News, for example, which makes sense, that once you've read one particular angle or opinion on a news story, the next thing you want to read might be a different angle or opinion. So it's very much more likely that a slightly different take on a story is going to rank, rather than, and that's why they group them into kind of context. So you'll see 700 other stories like this, and then you'll see another block, which is still about the same story, but they've taken a completely different approach to that story. At the other end of the extreme is queries where Google knows that there is going to be essentially no uniqueness in the search result, and lyrics is a good example of this. They've publicly said they have actual different algorithms for lyric searches, or different settings for variables for lyric searches, where they essentially turn the duplicate content filter off. Because if you search for a snippet of lyrics, and you want to get the whole set of lyrics for that song, then anybody who doesn't have duplicate content is probably wrong. And so there's kind of an interesting difference going on there. So really what you're trying to do is stand out from your competitors. Understand your market, understand the kinds of searches that your users are doing, and stand out from the other people who rank there now. And sometimes that can be as simple as using content that isn't unique, but is unique relative to the other people who rank. And there's all kinds of tips and tricks for doing this. Incidentally, one thing that is a little hint I got the other day, one thing that is not going to work is using Google Translate. This is something I've heard bandied around at previous conferences, is I'll just translate your content into German, then French, then back into English, or something like that. I heard that, the way I heard it phrased is that Google are remarkably good at spotting their own translations. I'll leave you to draw your own conclusions on that one. Clean up your data. So don't just take what the manufacturer gives you in the product feed or the data feed, but look at search query. So the thing on the left here, Kingston Data Traveler 101 USB flash drive, 4 gigabyte cyan, is what comes through in an Amazon product feed. Doesn't sound a lot like a user's search term to me. Kingston USB memory stick is the kind of thing that people search for, or USB memory stick, or 4 gigabyte USB memory stick. Those are search queries. So what you want to do is aggregate, you kind of look for the common themes, map it to your keyword data, and clean up the information that's coming through in the feeds, which gives you two benefits. Firstly, it gives you the uniqueness thing, And secondly, it actually aligns the stuff you're putting on your website with stuff that people are actually searching for, which is, I don't know, back in SEO 101, I guess. It is, of course, true that you can not do any of this and just get loads and loads and loads of links. This is a SEO book screenshot of Mahalo showing their spectacular lack of unique content. Fine, probably a risky game to play. I would suggest that this tactic is going to work less and less well in the coming months and years. If I were in your shoes, I would be looking at ways to differentiate in genuine ways. I would look at differentiating in less genuine ways in the short term, but not rest on those laurels. Differentiate wherever you can, basically, but differentiate in quality ways and in sustainable ways throughout your whole site as you go along. This slide is, I blame my brother for, but I had that robot arm wrestling the human. This is back to the human side of things. Hand jobs. Google does employ a lot of human content raters. And there was the leaked document, the quality rater guidelines. It's worth having a read of that. The first tier of their defense is not public spam complaints. It's the people in their employ. But these are not people like, Matt Cutts and Brian White and, Adam Lasnik, who are super smart engineers. These are minimum wage people found on not quite freelancing websites, but it's a big team of variable quality, and they have guidelines. They're looking for sites that add value to users, are relevant. These are very subjective values. These are not things that a machine can determine which is the very reason they have the manual reviewers. So this is where you want to employ your kind of social engineering skills. This is where, for example, design plays a huge part. A really nicely designed website is much less likely to get marked as low quality by a human rater than a stock WordPress theme or a poorly put together something that looks like it was done in 1994. Shouldn't be true, right? There's no real reason why the data would be any more or less unique, why the content would be any more or less compelling, but people are people. People are human. They are influenced by these things. So all of those quality and trust factors that you would probably want to put in place to impress your real users also help with impressing the Google quality raters. And it's just one more reason to build a fast website that looks nice, that has obvious calls to action and showcases whatever it is that you're best at. Whole bunch of lists, links to tools and things that are mentioned in here. But I think it's probably time for a few questions. Okay, you stand there.
Direct.
Who's got questions?
Yeah. This gentleman over here.
There's a microphone coming.
I'm working on... Hello. I'm working on a project at the moment to build 28,000 pages of content, targeting particular locations and the nearest shop that we have that would provide them with the service. Now, I want 28,000 pages all to have unique content on. That's a big team of monkeys. Is there a automated tool that is going to provide defendable content to Google? I mean, the content on page is actually pretty good because it's pulling genuine retail chain from a database, but that's fine. But if I want to target, the next village along, it's probably the same supplier. So I do need to put unique content on each of those 28,000 pages.
Right. So like same address data, but a page with different sort of titles, meta description, maybe H1. But apart from that, right now you've got the rest of the pages blank.
Yeah, essentially. So how do I generate on the fly that much content? And I need it by January.
So that's it. Yeah. So I would not look at that as building 28,000 pages. I would segment it down a little bit. Either driven off existing analytics data or keyword research or something like that. Pick yourself your top N.
Well, that's the problem if you're targeting the long tail. I had, on this particular project, I 9,000 terms last month who generated 1 click each. Now that's that's low levels, but that was 1,000 orders it generated.
Yep. No,
So,
absolutely.
you know,
So
that's
I mean,
not
this is not the entire approach, but first of all, like, segment yourself down, and that means, pick out the top tiny bit,
Yeah.
pick out the next big chunk, and 3 or 4 levels, I would say. The very bottom level, which is probably those 1 clicks, I would do 2 things. I would probably start with a combination of boilerplate,
Sort of a boilerplate.
non-unique content, well, kind of technically unique, like I showed earlier. Say the number of chains you found, but otherwise basically boilerplate. With, if you can, mash up some data that will be technically unique. So pull it from behind, whatever you might have, something behind paywalls.
Staff that work at the office, the top products sold from that location. I mean, I suppose you might want to start with the location that is true first of all, right, and work on that, and then then you've got the problem of the related pages.
So this is unique but not high quality content. So, or at least not human generated. So it is technically unique. You'll never find that snippet anywhere else on the web, but similar snippets will appear across your website. And so it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be a start.
If you could encourage slowly but surely. I mean, if you put all of these pages live, what would probably happen is the most unique core page would win, and the others would just be filtered out. I suppose then you could build the ability for, you could use some UGC, right? And what I think is really interesting is that if somebody leaves a review on a certain page, it doesn't necessarily mean that you've got to use that text on that page. You could decide to deploy it elsewhere.
So if you're getting one page that's getting loads of reviews, and you've got other pages that are local to that, or other pages where the review would be appropriate, you could choose to use that.
Like
spread out your reviews across those pages, basically. It's also amazing how much something like Mechanical Turk will get you on this kind of thing. People will write surprisingly large amounts of content for
and it can be close to meaningless and still rank. Not that I do that.
I mean, this is just from tests.
The data we pull from the database will give us a head start. We just want to put some extra, not stuff it with terms, but try and get some relevant stuff in there.
I think then your head start should probably be that the actual location itself, the true page location with the store details, pull through some data that you've already got. I really like the idea of like products and staff, and then start syndicating the review content if you can get it around in a circle or anything else. Like, I don't know if you could scrape Review Centre's reviews.
I wouldn't be pleased with that.
Yeah.
So don't get on it.
Also, actually, just one other thing is write yourself as many as you can be bothered to, or you can get your staff to do, of those boilerplates. So different kinds of standard things, and then tag up your analytics with which one you've used, and you'll see whether you'll see how much uniqueness you need effectively to get in some of this stuff.
Yeah, we've got a client in the car finance industry, and it's really, really interesting because they have something kind of similar to this. And the golden rule is that they've got sort of a set of location pages, and then they've got a list of dealerships that deal with those finance products. And they were initially quite boilerplate pages, and what we found was that just 3 or 4 unique addresses on each page made them rank. So we're talking 4 or 5 lines of text would probably easily do it.
Yeah, it's remarkable how little unique.
The problem is if you've got Village A and it's supplied by a shop in a separate village, and you want to appear for the search term Village A as well as the search term because it's genuine. If you've got a retail outlet and it's got sort of 10-mile radius around it, you want to appear in all the terms related to that whole area. And I appreciate this is really, really tiny levels of detail, but when you add it all together, that's a hell of a large campaign. Yeah,
and if you can get any other local data on that specific micro-location, like places to park, for example. I don't know. You could,
Okay, there's all kinds of, the slide I showed that had the cheat sheet, I showed loads of data sources. Some of those were things like data.gov. There's a whole load of data on kind of census-y type information, how many people live there. That information is not going to be unique, but it might be unique in conjunction with some of the other stuff you're showing. Final point, just to go a little bit pearly white hat for a second, is yes, you're going to want to roll these things out quickly, but looking to the long term, thinking about this as a campaign over the next few years, I would add in a plan to work out the order of priority that you're going to pay attention to those pages in, and gradually make them better and better and better as you go along. And that's humans making them better.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, that's smart. Yeah, no, sorry. Yeah, I'm supposed to tell you where to. Newbie moderator, sorry.
Just about the H reviews, I've started to generate some review content. I've got like 10 out of the last month. Would you recommend before I submit those to Google that I build up more, or should I submit them straight away?
Sorry, say that again. You've marked up 10 reviews.
I've not marked up any yet, but I've generated 10 reviews so far, say. But obviously I want to create hundreds and hundreds. Is it worth submitting to Google now or waiting until I've got
That's a good question. I would probably, because there seems to be quite a long lag between submitting and Google actually accepting you, I'd probably mark up what you've got at the moment, try and get it working, and then submit to Google. And you can always, once you get accepted, if you want to add more